Have you ever said something in anger that you did not really mean? Watched it land like a knife in someone's heart, and then realized you could never fully take it back? Have you ever felt that life keeps bringing you the same painful endings again and again, and deep down suspected that it might have something to do with the way you handle your emotions, not just with bad luck or other people? Welcome back to this channel. Thank you for being here, for staying with these long, deep conversations about life, karma, practice, and destiny. This is the script for the 10th article in this batch, and today we are going to look straight at something many people underestimate: our temper. The original text this is based on says something very sharp: a person's real blessing is often hidden in their emotions. In other words, it is not just your talent, not just your family background, not just your education or your opportunities that shape your destiny. It is also how you handle anger, hurt, jealousy, anxiety, disappointment, and frustration. Two people can have almost the same condition, but one has a gentle, stable inner climate, while the other explodes at every small irritation. 10 years later, their lives look completely different. On the surface, we might call it fate. On a deeper level, it is often emotional cause and effect. Today, we are going to walk slowly through this connection between temper and destiny. We will talk about why anger is so seductive, how one outburst can plant long-lasting seeds, why controlling your emotions is not the same as suppressing them, and how a person's greatest blessing is often the ability to stay clear and kind in moments when it would be easier to explode. We will not talk from a cold, moralizing place. We will talk like humans who have all lost our temper, who have all said things we regret, who have all felt our chest fill with heat and our mouth fill with sharp words. As you listen, I invite you to quietly remember your own stories, the fights that changed a relationship forever, the impulse that cost you a job, the moment you surprised yourself with how cruel you could be when triggered, and also the moments you managed, just once or twice, to stay calm in a situation where the old you would have burned everything down. That gap between those two versions of you is where your blessing lies. Imagine a man named Eric. From childhood, people called him hot-blooded. At school, if someone teased him, he would throw punches before the teacher could even stand up. If his siblings took his things, he would scream and slam doors. His parents tried various methods. Sometimes they scolded him. Sometimes they ignored him. Sometimes they laughed it off as boys being boys. He grew up believing that having a fierce temper meant he was strong. He felt proud when others said, "Do not mess with Eric. He is dangerous." In his early 20s, this temper followed him into work. He was smart and quick, but also sharp-tongued. When colleagues made mistakes, he would criticize them openly. When his boss gave feedback, he would defend himself aggressively. If a client was unreasonable, he would argue instead of looking for solutions. At first, some people admired his directness. They thought, at least he is honest. But honesty without kindness is just aggression wearing a nice name. One day, during a stressful period, a project went wrong. The client sent a harsh email. The boss was angry. A meeting was called. Everyone was tense. In that meeting, instead of calmly analyzing what happened, Eric felt his chest heat up. He thought, "Why are they blaming me? Others also made mistakes." The old pattern took over. He raised his voice, pointed at colleagues, and said, "This is not my fault. If they had done their part, nothing would have gone wrong." The room went silent. His words hung in the air like smoke. His boss stared at him for a long moment. He said quietly, "We can fix a failed project with effort. It is much harder to fix a broken team." A few days later, he was called into the office and handed a termination letter. On the paper, the reason was written as incompatibility with company culture and repeated unprofessional behavior. In reality, it had taken only a few seconds of uncontrolled anger to push a long building chain of impatience over the edge. Later, when he was calmer, He knew that he had gone too far. He knew that he had humiliated his colleagues, disrespected his boss, and jeopardized the company in front of a client. But the damage was done. He told himself at first, this company does not appreciate real people. They want fake smiles. He went around telling friends that he had been unfairly treated. However, as months passed and he kept failing interviews, he began to notice a pattern. Each time a recruiter called his previous workplace for reference, the feedback about his skills was positive, but the feedback about his temper was cautious at best, outright negative at worst. People said, he is capable, but he is difficult. He does not know how to control his emotion. And slowly, a painful realization came. It was not fate that took away his opportunities. It was his temper. He began to see his anger not as proof of strength, but as a hole in his bucket. No matter how much talent and effort he poured into his life, that hole would leak everything away. In a quiet moment, he remembered an incident from his teenage years. He had been playing a game with a younger cousin. The child accidentally broke his favorite toy. At the time, he had exploded, shouting, "You are useless. Can't you do anything right?" making the little boy cry for a long time. Adults had told him to apologize, but he had refused, thinking it was the child's fault. Now, as an adult, sitting alone with his failed job history, he realized that his words back then were the exact same words his life was now whispering to him. Hot tempers feel powerful, but the verdict of cause and effect is quiet and unromantic. If you constantly injure others with your emotions, you will sooner or later stand in the ruins of relationships, opportunities, and trust. That is one way emperor decides endings. On the other hand, imagine someone else with a completely different relationship to emotions. Her name is Mia. Mia is not naturally calm. She feels things intensely. When she is happy, she laughs loudly. When she is sad, she cries easily. When she is angry, her heart pounds and her face flushes. As a teenager, she also had outbursts. But early on, life gave her a kind teacher who told her a sentence. She never forgot, your emotions are like waves. You cannot stop waves from rising, but you can learn to surf. If you let every wave smash into others, one day you will find yourself alone on the beach. The teacher suggested a simple practice when she felt a strong emotion. She should pause and name it silently. Not, I am this emotion, but anger is here, hurt is here, fear is here. At first, she thought it was silly. What difference does it make to say it in my head? But as she kept trying, she noticed something subtle the moment she named the emotion. A small gap appeared between her and it. In that gap, she had a choice. One evening, years later, that small practice changed her life. She was working at a company with a difficult boss. He was often impatient, sometimes unfair. That day, he had yelled at her in front of others for a mistake that, in truth, had not been entirely hers. She felt humiliated, angry, and tempted to shout back or slam the door and quit. Standing in the hallway, hands trembling, she felt the familiar urge to explode. But she remembered the teacher. So she whispered inside her mind, burning anger is here. Humiliation is here. By naming it, she did not push it away. She felt it fully, like standing in a hot wind. But in that same moment, another thought rose. If I shout now, I will feel temporarily powerful and permanently regretful. So instead of storming back in, she walked to the bathroom, splashed water on her face, and took 10 slow breaths. Then she returned, waited until others had left, and said to her boss, in a steady voice, I understand that you are under a lot of pressure and that this mistake affected the project. But when you speak to me that way in front of everyone, I feel humiliated. I would like us to find a way to discuss problems that does not involve shouting. Her boss, who was used to either silent resentment or emotional explosions from staff, was thrown off. He muttered something defensive at first, but later, after thinking, He apologized. From that day on, their relationship shifted. He began trusting her more, seeing her as emotionally mature. She became someone he could rely on during crises. Years later, when he retired, he recommended her as his successor. On the surface, people said she was lucky. In reality, that luck had been shaped in a corridor, in a bathroom, in tense slow breath, and in a single choice not to let temper rule her behavior. That is another way emotions hide blessings. The original idea that a person's real blessing lies in their emotions points to something very important. Life often gives greater responsibility, opportunity, and influence to those who can handle their own inner storms. If you cannot handle your own anger, how will you handle authority over others? If you cannot handle your own envy, how will you handle success without turning cruel? If you cannot handle your own fear, how will you step into necessary risk when the time comes? Spiritual traditions speak of karma, cause and effect. We usually think of this at the level of big actions: cheating, stealing, helping, giving. But karma is also being created constantly by our emotional reactions. Think about it. A stranger bumps into you on the street. If you snap, watch where you are going. Their day darkens. They might go home and shout at their child. The child might kick the dog. The dog might bark all night and keep the neighbor awake, who then goes to work exhausted and makes a mistake. You do not see the chain, but you helped light it. If instead you say, "It is okay, I am fine," or even simply smile and step aside, the chain is different. The stranger's nervous system relaxes instead of tightening. They might darken more calmly. They might be kinder to the next person. You may think, this is too exaggerated. But, on a subtle level, this is how worlds are created, one small emotional ripple at a time. Your temper is not a private matter. It is a weather system that affects everyone around you. Now, many people confuse two things: expressing emotions and being controlled by emotions. They think that if they do not shout and smash things, they are suppressing themselves. They proudly call themselves direct or honest when they are actually just untrained. On the other hand, some people are so afraid of conflict that they bottle everything up, smiling on the outside while resentment rots inside. They think this is self-control, but it is not. It is self-abandonment. Real emotional wisdom is somewhere in the middle. It is the ability to feel fully, see clearly, and choose wisely. To get there, we need to understand how emotions actually move. An emotion often begins as a physical sensation: tight chest, clenched jaw, hot face, fast heartbeat. Then thoughts rush in to explain it. Like he always does this. She never listens. This is so unfair. Those thoughts pour fuel on the fire. The more you replay the story, the more intense the physical storm. If, in that moment, you believe that the only way to get relief is to act out the emotion, you will say or do things that have heavy consequences. But if you train yourself to notice the physical signs early, to name the emotion, and to wait before acting, you will often find that the wave passes or at least reduces in intensity. Then you can respond from a clearer place. This is not weakness. It is strength. It is much easier to shout than to stay present. It is much easier to slam a door than to speak honestly. It is much easier to freeze someone out than to have a vulnerable conversation. Anyone can be a slave to their emotions. Being their wise guardian is a different level of humanity. Let us look at how different kinds of temper create different kinds of destiny. There is the volcanic temper people who explode over small things. Their family walks on eggshells. Children learn to hide, to lie, to develop anxiety. At work, colleagues avoid them, silently distancing themselves from this time bomb. Opportunities, trust, and intimacy quietly move away. There is the icy temper people who rarely shout but punish with silence, coldness, and withdrawal. When hurt, they say, "It is fine," but their tone is sharp. They do not explode. They freeze. Those around them feel lonely, rejected, and unsafe. Over time, relationships wither because no one wants to spend their life begging for warmth. There is the toxic temper people who weaponize words. They always know where to poke to hurt most. In conflict, they say things like, "You are just like your useless father," or "No one would love you except me." Each sentence is a scar. Even if they later apologize, the words remain in memory. There is the chaotic temper people who are emotionally unpredictable. You never know what version of them you will get. One day, they are affectionate. The next day, they are cruel. One day, they are excited. The next day, they are hopeless. Those around them live in constant fear, adjusting themselves to avoid triggering explosions. All of these temper styles are forms of emotional karma in motion. And then there is another kind of steady temper people who still feel emotions deeply, but do not let them decide their actions. They may raise their voice sometimes, but rarely from cruelty, more from urgency. They can say, "I am angry," without attacking. They can set boundaries without humiliating. They apologize when they cross lines. Being near such people feels safe. You know that even if disagreement arises, they will not deliberately destroy you. Over time, these people are the ones life likes to put in key positions: parents whom children rest, leaders whom teams rely on, caregivers whom patients feel warm with, partners whom spouses lean on during storms. They may not be the flashiest, but they are the ones whose blessings are deep and stable. So the question becomes, what kind of emotional climate do you want to become? Because you are not just living in a climate, you are generating one. Many people say, "This is just my personality. I have always been like this." But that sentence is often a shield to avoid looking at the real cost of their temper. If you dare to look honestly, you may see that your most painful life endings were not only caused by external fate, but also by a series of emotional choices. Maybe you lost a relationship not only because the other person was flawed, but also because you kept stabbing them with sharp words every time you were hurt. Maybe you lost a job not only because the boss was unfair, but also because you could not tolerate feedback without turning defensive. Maybe your family distance is not only because others are selfish, but also because your home became a battlefield whenever things did not go your way. This is not about blaming yourself for everything. It is about reclaiming your power. If everything is someone else's fault, you are a victim. But if some part of the pattern lies in your temper, then you have something you can work with. Your emotion is the first place you can practice changing your fate. Now, how do we actually do that? Beyond understanding it intellectually, first, we need to stop glorifying our bad temper. People often say things like, "At least I am real. I say what I think," as if that excuses cruelty. Or, "I cannot control it. It just happens," as if their emotions were wild animals with no leash. The truth is, we cannot control what emotions arise, but we can, with practice, control what we do with them. When you say, "This is just how I am," you are locking the door of your own growth. Instead, you can say, "This is how I have been, but I am willing to learn a different way." Second, we need to build small pause habits. You cannot transform your temper only in the big, dramatic fights. By the time you are in a full argument, the emotional wave is already huge. The real training happens in small daily annoyances. You are in trafficking. Someone suddenly cuts in. You are in a store and the staff is slow. You are at home and your family member leaves things messy. In those moments, you practice pausing. 1 breath, 2 breaths. Name what you feel. Then choose your response. If you do this hundreds of times in small situations, when a big emotional storm comes, you will have some skill. Third, we need to learn to express without attacking. Instead of "you always," "you never," "you are," learn to say when this happened. "I feel," "I need," "can we?" For example, instead of "you never care about me," You are so selfish. Say, when you cancel our plans at the last minute. I feel disappointed and unimportant. Can we talk about how to handle this better? This is not just about being nice. It is about actually being effective. When you attack, the other person's defense walls rise. They focus on protecting themselves, not on understanding you. When you share your feelings and needs, they have a chance to listen. Fourth, we need to understand that calming our temper is not for others alone. It is for our own health and blessings. Every time you explode, your own body suffers heart rate, blood pressure, immune system, digestion. Over time, this constant stress damages you physically. Even more, your mind becomes a painful place to live. After anger passes, you may feel guilty, ashamed, or empty. You may replay scenes and torture yourself. A gentle temper is not only a gift to others, it is a gift to yourself. From a spiritual perspective, we can see every emotional trigger as practice, not punishment. When someone pushes your buttons, it is like life saying, here is the next level of your training. You can use it to justify or karma or harsh words, more harmful action. Or you can use it to see your own patterns. Why did this particular comment hurt so much? Why do I react so strongly in this situation? What belief or wound is being touched? In this way, your temper becomes a teacher instead of a weapon. Let us look at one more story to ground this in real life. There was a woman named Claire, known among friends as someone with no filter. She spoke whatever was in her mind. People laughed and said she was refreshingly honest. But over the years, her closest relationships kept breaking. She criticized her partner's appearance in front of others. She commented on her friend's weight and age. She snapped at her parents for small mistakes. She called it just joking. But the jokes left bruises. One day, a friend who loved her very much finally said, "Do you realize that many of us are scared to be vulnerable around you? Because we never know when you will turn our insecurity into a punchline." At first, she was offended. She thought, "You are too sensitive." But later, she remembered the faces of people when she had made such jokes. She saw, in memory, flinches, forced smiles, eyes that looked away. She realized that her uncontrolled tongue, flowing directly from raw emotion without any filter of kindness, had been costing her trust and intimacy for years. From that day, she started a small practice. She would think a sharp comment, then ask herself, does this need to be said? If yes, can I say it more gently? If no, can I let it go? It felt unnatural at first, like walking with new shoes. But after months, her relationships began to feel safer. People opened up more. She felt less lonely. Her blessing was not in a sudden watery win or big promotion. It was in the slow, quiet transformation of her emotional habits. You might say, this all sounds good, but I have been like this for decades. Can people really change their temper? The honest answer is it is not easy. But yes, it is possible. And it is worth it. Your nervous system has been wired a certain way by your past. Maybe you grew up in a family where shouting was normal, where emotional blackmail was common, where you never learned healthy expression. Maybe you never had a calm role model. But the brain can rewire. Habits can shift. It requires awareness, humility, and repetition. You might not go from explosive to perfectly calm. That even reducing your harsh reactions by 30% can change your life. A few fewer broken plates, a few fewer cruel sentences, a few more apologies, a few more deep breaths. Over 10 years, that difference becomes huge. From a karma perspective, every time you stop an angry impulse from turning into a harmful action, you stop a new chain of suffering from being born. That is real merit. Now, I want to speak directly to that part of you that feels ashamed when you think about your temper. Maybe you remember your child's frightened face, Maybe you remember your partner's tears. Maybe you remember a slammed door that was the last thing someone saw before leaving for good. You cannot rewrite those scenes. They are done, but you can decide what kind of scenes you will create from today onward. Guilt that leads to despair is useless. Guilt that leads to practice is gold. You can go to those who have hurt and say, "I see now that my temper has injured you. I am sorry. I am working on it." They may or may not forgive you immediately. That is not under your control. What is under your control is whether you keep using your temper as an excuse or start treating it as your main spiritual homework. Your next argument is not only a fight. It is an exam of your practice. Your next irritation is not only a noise. It is a training session. Your next wave of jealousy is not only ugly. It is a mirror. The blessing hidden in your emotions is this: if you can learn to hold these waves without drowning others, you become someone life can trust with more love, because you will not destroy it with explosions. More responsibility, because you will not abuse people under your authority. More insight, because your mind will not be constantly clouded by storms. So, as we start to close this long reflection, let me ask you two questions. First, in your own story, can you see at least one ending that was partly created by your temper? Not to blame yourself, but to be honest. Second, can you also see at least one moment, however small, when you did not let your temper drive, and the outcome was better because of it? Between those 2 points lies your path. If you feel comfortable, I invite you to share in the comments one experience where anger ruined something important, or one experience where calm saved something important. You do not need to write all the details, just enough to remind yourself and others that emotions really do shape destiny. Your story might help someone else who is right now standing on the edge of a similar cliff, about to say or do something they will regret. If this script touched your heart, if it made you look at your own temper not with self-hatred, but with a new sense of responsibility and hope, please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you do not miss future uploads. If you feel called to support this space more deeply, you can also consider joining as a member. That support helps us continue creating long-form content about awakening, wisdom, cause and effect, compassion, emotional practice, and the invisible ways our inner weather becomes our outer fate. Thank you for walking through all 10 of these long journeys with me. This is the script for the 10th article in this batch, and it is the final one in this batch. May your temper become your teacher, not your prison. May your emotions become a source of blessing for you and everyone around you. And may every deep breath you take in the heat of a difficult moment quietly change the story of your life.
At the end of the day, we all need something that brings us back to ourselves. Something that reminds us to slow down, breathe, and stay centered. Simple bracelet can do exactly that. Every bead you touch brings your mind back to calm, back to clarity, back to the present moment. If one of the bracelets you just saw resonates with you, you can find the purchase link in the video description and explore more beautiful styles in our channel store. Let the one meant for you find its way to your wrist.